Now we have seen the new implants on the carriers, on normal ships, even on versatile solo ships. But how will the new implant perform on a super carrier? Well, that is something that had been on my mind for quite a while. After all, these monsters are currently the largest ships with the highest DPS amount in the game. So how does the new implant affect these things? Well, today we'll be finding that out. Now, the super carriers haven't been changed so far. They still have the same stats as they used to, although I noticed that their damage application kind of dropped when I tested them out versus Supercapitals. Versus, not Supercapitals, but versus the Subcapitals. So that's one very interesting thing that I can tell you. So let me quickly show the Aerospace tag, the implant. Now this implant, as I already mentioned, it's the newest one, and it will be set for DPS. So I'll have all of the necessary general units set for maximum possible DPS for a carrier. Okay, now everything is in place. The other units aren't going to be that important. The units that are going to be important are the units for the fighter damage mode, which will be used quite a lot in this video. But this is the current layout that I have for this implant. And we have 78,000 DPS on this thing. Now this is a build that I've had for quite a while on this ship. It is a PvE, maybe PvP fleet build, but I wouldn't really be flying a Wyvern like this for PvP, that's for sure, because it has just not many tank modules installed. But they still have the Super Carrier Swarm module. You also have command bursts, and you also have a lot of other free slots that you can utilize for whatever module that you want. And these are going to be my fighters. I have Cyclops because Cyclops doing the most damage, and of course some Immater and Caldari fighters as well. Quad damage amplifiers, a super carrier damage control, adaptive, and a booster, as well as a micro wardrift guide. Now as for the rigs, I went cheap on this ship. I mean, this build and the implant of course works on tank or NDPS ships. Doesn't matter what build you have, you can utilize the extra bonus DPS on a tank build or on a DPS build. But this ship today will be a DPS build. After all, we are going to be finding out how much DPS we can get out of this thing. So 78,000 DPS is the current cold, well, I call it cold value, but it's the current cold value since the modules are offline. And let me quickly refuel this thing. It eats a lot of heavy water. I like how my ships are literally running on water, kind of funny. Well, heavy water, but you know, it's still kind of water. And now these things, fuel tanks, are topped up, and that means I can undock, and let's take a look how much DPS I can get out of this thing. Now I have the new nanocore that's reworked, although I haven't picked any damage bonus from the nanocore. So that I don't affect the DPS in that aspect. Although if you have this ship, you probably have a DPS nanocore, so your DPS will probably be higher than the DPS that you are going to see here if you have the Wyvern. The Wyvern isn't really all about that DPS, the Wyvern is all about that tank, but you can technically still use the ship as a DPS since it has still 25 million hit points, 6.9 million shield hit points, which is nice. I mean, this thing is the king of tank in the game at the moment. 115,751.64 DPS when the damage mods are active. That's actually impressive. And here you can take a look at the stats of the fight. I mean, the fighters are slow, and you will see what I'm talking about when I'm using this ship in combat very soon. Here is the nanocore. I picked extra 24% shield since it's the Wyvern, and the Wyvern is all about attack, but you can also use the DPS stat if you like. That is up to player preference. So if you want the ship for full DPS, then pick the nanocore for full DPS. It works really well, but if you have the Wyvern for attack, then extra shield is always going to be helpful. So let's take this thing out for a ride. Now I already said that I noticed that the heavy fighters damage application kind of seemed to have dropped versus Supercapitals, and it's going to be very noticeable, especially if you compare how much damage this ship will be doing to the Supercapitals, and if you compare the damage that, let's say, carriers or versatile starships do to Supercapitals. It would seem like the normal carriers apply a lot more damage. They apply the damage a lot more properly to the Supercapitals. And honestly, I'm fine with that, since the heavy fighters are primarily designed for capitals. Did I drink too much, or did I see 211 anomalies in the system? Maybe I am drunk? Well, once I finish taking some screenshots, we'll be taking a second look at the anomaly count. Maybe I'm drunk, I don't know. We're about to find out. Anyway, the new nanocore looks nice, I would say. They will change these nanocores one by one. It seemed like they changed like 8 of them. What the hell is this? Are you kidding me? Yo, what the hell is going on in this game? I have absolutely no idea. And look how the anomaly count just dropped. You know, this game, I don't know if I'm drunk or the game is drunk, or if both the game and myself are drunk. I have no idea. But there's definitely something that's not right with this system, that's for sure. Anyway, let's see how this monster will work. Now, I made a bunch of videos with the Wyvern. My favorite build for the Wyvern is full chunk, of course, full brick tank. And I did say that in a jokingly way. I mean, there is no immortal ship in the game. Everything dies given enough DPS, of course, and enough time. But I jokingly said that the Wyvern is immortal. And of course, some players took that out of context and they think that I literally said that, you know, you can't kill a Wyvern. Well, that's obviously not the case. You can't kill a Wyvern. The Wyverns have died, and plenty of them actually have been destroyed. But when I say it's immortal, I mean it in a more of a joking way, in a maybe a comedic way to describe something that's ridiculously tanky. Because, as I mentioned before, the Wyvern is currently the king of tank. There is no other ship that's as tanky as this. And of course, it has a crazy shield recharge rate. And with a proper build, I managed to get this thing to tank maybe about 250 to 350,000 DPS, and that is only with the passive tank. That is without the booster being active. And speaking of the booster, the super carrier module, there's a special module for the super carriers, does give your ship extra capacity. It's basically converting fuel, the fuel that you have recharged in the ship, into capacitor energy. Look at it as a secondary generator that's basically running on fuel and that's supplying your primary generator with electricity. I know it sounds kind of weird, but that's basically what it kinda is on these ships, since it does give you free, well, not exactly free, but it does give you free capacitor, and that one module easily replaces 3 capacitor batteries, and these ships can easily be used without capacitor batteries, or if you know you have the same build that I used before on the previous videos, you have one capacitor battery, and one capacitor battery with the super carrier cover module active is enough to maintain the whole ship at about 80%, 85% capacitor stability. So that module is ridiculously important for a super carrier because it is kind of a life support unit for these ships that's making them even tankier than they are by default. And the super carrier cover module also repairs armor and repairs shield, so it's also adding tons of extra I call it passive recharge. I mean, when you combine a passive recharge with the cover module, you get a insane tank. And of course, you also add a lot of resistances to it, proper tank build, and you get yourself a very, 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 very tanky ship. So the Wyvern at the moment, at least until Titans are out, is the tankiest ship in the game. Of course, for a tanky ship, you need a tanky build, and this is definitely the build that I'm using right now. Is obviously a no tanky build, so don't use this build if you're looking for tank. If you're looking for tank, well, then just slap adaptives, booster, or boosters, well, 2 of them in most cases, although 1 of them is actually enough, and a proper integrated tank build. After all, these are 10,000 USD ships. I still cannot believe that this thing costs like 8,000, 5 to 8,000 USD. Well, that's the estimate, not like you paid that money to get the ship, but that's how much investment it costs. Maybe more than that, I don't know, but it's, you know, kind of crazy how much internet spaceships cost. Wonder how much Titans will cost. These things are going to be so funny, and of course they're going to be so, well, not broken, but they're going to be wild ships, that's for sure. Cannot wait to see how tanky I can make those things. Anyway, back to the Wyvern here. So as you can see, it does struggle to do full damage. I mean, if you look at how much damage my fighters do and how much damage I'm applying to the targets, it is significantly different from before, that's for sure. You used to melt them. Now it's not that easy to send the heavy fighters onto a smaller ship. Now even if you speed up the fighters, they are still not doing that much damage. I mean, they do 40,000 damage per fighter and they hit 800, so yeah, there is definitely a damage application issue going on here with the heavy fighters for smaller ships. Although, as I mentioned before, that is completely fine. These fighters are primarily designed to be sent at large ships like carriers, dreadnoughts, and Titans in the future. So very interesting to see that the application has changed. Now this implant has a active mode, and the active mode basically slows down your fighters, but at the same time it also enhances their range. Now on versatile assault ships it worked fine. If you want to use it in an active way, you can use it in an active way. With the normal carriers it also worked really well. Made the carriers fighters perform like sentries. Now with super carriers it feels different. I wouldn't really recommend that you have the implant turned on. I mean, the DPS bonus is passive, so you don't have to touch the implant in order to get the bonus. But if you want extra range, for example, it is going to underperform since the fighters are going to be really, really slow and the damage application against the subcapitals with the with the heavy fighters is not going to be obviously good. So against subcapitals, if you are forced to use heavies, then yeah, maybe keep them offline, because maybe keep the implant offline because it's not going to help much. But if you are using light fighters, then it may help, but I would still, or at least on Super, I would still keep the implant, the active mode of the implant offline for the for the Supercapitals, since you can accidentally forget that the implant is on and it can cost you the ship. I've seen that happen so far a couple times. So for these ships, the implant doesn't necessarily have to be enabled. It can just run with the passive boost, and it will have absolutely no issues with the DPS. The bombard tactic implant still works really well on the Super Capitals, and there is the question: what is better? Although that's a very tricky question. What is better for Super Capitals? Bombard tactic or aerospace tactic implant? Now, if you are, let's say, hot dropping on a Tempest fleet, or if you're hot dropping on I don't know, Super Capitals and Dreadnoughts, then you might want to have the bombard tactic over the aerospace tactic, since you want to kill the Dreadnoughts as quickly as possible, and if you have multiple of these ships, just drop a bunch of Super Capitals with bombard tactic and just delete everything. That's basically how it goes. They have a lot of alpha damage. But let's say the situation is different, and let's say we have a CTA scenario. You can use the bomber tactic implant in a CTA scenario easily. It works really well, especially if you have the remote reload. Then you don't have to worry about the speed of the fighters. But for longer durations, for longer battles, sustained DPS is definitely much better than just burst and alpha. So for longer battles, the aerospace tactic implant definitely will work better, since in the longer run you will be doing a lot more damage than with the bombard tactic implant. And of course, this implant seems to be using less implant fuel, and it also seems to be, well, overall cheaper to use. I mean, also very good for PvE, definitely much better for PvE than the bombard tactic. After all, sustained DPS is more useful and more important than just bursts high alpha when we are looking at PvE. So I guess both implants are in the end pretty solid, although some are good for other things. I mean, the bomber tactic definitely good for deleting stuff in seconds. That's just undeniable. It's still the most overpowered implants in the game. Nothing is as broken as the bomber tactic. That's just how it is, unfortunately. Well, I say unfortunately, it's just how it is, period. No other implant is as nasty as the bomber tactic. Not because the implants, I mean, all implants, if you ask me, need to be nerfed, but it's just because of how drones work. It's because of how fighters work, light ships, and there are some drone modes that just put that implant so well to the use that there is no other ship for other implants that can do the same thing. I'm looking at the Stratios, looking at the Supercapitals and similar, but we'll see what they will do down the road with the implants. I was kinda expecting a specialized implant for light fishers, but I guess that kind of didn't make much sense, and the implant can be used for all fighter or drone based weapon systems, including light ships, fighters, heavy fighters, light fighters, and everything else that basically is remotely controlled the by the ship. And yes, if you're wondering, it does take me quite a while to actually clear this. I mean, this is an example of the application that I talked about. I used to clear this so fast with these things. Now it takes a while. Not necessarily a bad thing. After all, ships have to have its, well, use, and you can't have heavy fighters just wreck everything. They have to have a weak spot, and they seem to have a weak spot against subcapitals now. With the normal carriers, I would have already finished the mission here, which is kind of funny. I mean, you can technically use the light fighters on supercapitals, and you can technically get classic carrier performance out of it, but these things just love to use heavy fighters, and that doesn't mean that you should only use heavy fighters. I mean, there are going to be moments, if you are flying these ships, there are going to be moments where you want to have light fighters. There are going to be ships that your heavy fighters are not going to be able to catch or even kill. So having a fleet of light fighters in the fighter bay is always a smart idea. I mean, it's the same thing with any drone-based ship. With drone battleships, you want to have medium and small drones as well as large drones. I mean, you won't have everything that you might need in combat, and that includes the light fighters for supercapitals. Although I actually first thought that giving the fighters extra speeds is going to solve the problem of basically not applying damage well, but I was wrong. When you turn on the micro object guide, it makes the fighters just fast, but it doesn't change the damage application. I mean, a single fighter has the same, well, let's say accuracy, or let's say the explosion radius as a Raven Striker in siege mode. So it's not really going to be applying any damage to smaller ships for sure. I mean, if your ship is stationary, then I guess it's going to be popped regardless, but if your ship is moving and if it's very fast, then these heavy fighters will probably have a problem with that. Now light fighters would definitely deal with those small pesky ships with ease, but the heavy fighters, yeah, they will probably have some issues with speed. Now, besides the speed, I guess speed is very important for supercares, for some of them, when you want to catch stuff, I guess, but overall, if I were to change anything, I mean, that's just in a speculative way, if I were to change anything within the game right now, that would probably be only I say only, not only, but primarily I would personally focus on implants. I would focus on implants, and after that I would focus on other things, because implants, as they are, I talked about this before many times, but implants are still kind of, kind of nasty. Not as bad as it used to be, that's for sure, but they are still quite strong. So that would be one thing that I would change. But this was it for the Wyvern. I mean, this thing was always pretty awesome. I always liked the Wyvern, and the new implant works really well on this ship. And I'll be doing the same little test with the other supercares. I'm very excited to see which one. I mean, we already know that the Hell and the Nyx will have the best DPS that there is. Although the question is, how much DPS am I going to be able to push out of the Nyx and Hell? Well, we will be finding that out very very soon. Just look at the mess. What's even happening within the game? 165 anomalies. Jesus, that's a lot of anomalies. Anyway, that will be it for the Wyvern. If you guys would like to support me, feel free to like and subscribe. And with that being said, stay safe, play safe. And as always, I'll see you next time.